My name is Michael, and what I'm about to recount is a true hotel horror story that haunts me to this very day. It happened a few years ago during a business trip that took me to a small remote town in the middle of nowhere. The only accommodation available was a quaint old hotel known as the Blackwood Inn. Little did I know that this seemingly innocent place held dark secrets beyond my imagination. The Blackwood Inn stood alone on a desolate stretch of road, its eerie silhouette beckoning me as I pulled into the gravel parking lot. The building was a Victorian relic, its time-worn facade wearing the scars of countless years. As I entered the lobby, the smell of dampness and decay filled the air, a sign that the place hadn't been updated in decades. The receptionist, a frail elderly woman with sunken eyes, handed me an old-fashioned skeleton key with a rusted number tag that read 333. She mumbled something under her breath, barely audible, but I caught the words room and be careful. I dismissed it as senility and made my way to my room, passing dimly lit hallways that seemed to stretch on forever. Room 333 was at the end of a long corridor, its door slightly ajar. I pushed it open, revealing a room that sent shivers down my spine. The wallpaper, peeling and discolored, depicted faded scenes of children playing in a garden. The bed was adorned with moth-eaten lace curtains that swayed eerily in the non-existent breeze. Dusty, forgotten furniture lined the walls, and an ancient, cracked mirror hung opposite the bed. The room was cold, a chill that clung to my skin like a spectral presence. Despite the unsettling ambiance, I convinced myself that it was just an old hotel with outdated decor. I set my briefcase on the rickety wooden desk and tried to focus on my work, but the silence was oppressive. The only sound was the occasional creak of the floorboards, as if the very building itself was breathing. As night fell, the room grew darker, and my unease deepened. I decided to take a shower to shake off the creeping sense of dread. The bathroom was no less unsettling. The tiles were cracked and stained, and the water pressure was weak, alternating between scalding hot and icy cold. Just as I was about to finish, I heard something faint, a soft, whispering voice. I turned off the water and strained to listen. The voice seemed to be coming from the cracked mirror, barely audible at first, but growing louder with each passing second. It was a chorus of eerie, childlike voices, chanting a macabre rhyme. Come and play, come and stay, in room 333, night and day. Shadows dance, whispers prance, in the dark, take a chance. My heart raced as I stepped out of the shower, water dripping onto the cracked tiles. The chanting continued, the voices now a cacophony of sinister laughter and eerie nursery rhymes. I moved closer to the mirror, my reflection distorted by the shattered glass. Suddenly the room plunged into darkness, the chanting reaching a fevered pitch. Panicked, I fumbled for my phone, using its feeble light to guide me. The voices were now all around me, echoing through the room, as if the very walls themselves were speaking. In a blind panic, I flung open the door and stumbled into the dimly lit hallway. The chanting persisted, following me as I made my way down the corridor. The other doors along the hallway were cracked open, and I could hear the voices emanating from each room. I reached the lobby where the elderly receptionist was nowhere to be seen. The chanting had ceased, replaced by an eerie silence that was somehow even more unsettling. I raced to the front door and threw it open, desperate to escape the Blackwood Inn. As I stepped outside, the night air was thick with a sense of malevolence. I glanced back at the hotel, its windows now glowing with an otherworldly light. In the center window of room 333, I saw a shadowy figure, its silhouette contorted in unnatural angles. Terrified, I fled into the darkness, not looking back, and never returned to that cursed place. To this day, the memory of the Blackwood Inn and the sinister voices that haunted room 333 still send shivers down my spine. It was a true hotel horror story that I'll never forget. A nightmarish encounter with something beyond the realm of reason, and a chilling reminder that some places should remain forever unexplored. It was a dark and stormy night when I arrived at the Seaview Hotel. a decaying relic nestled on a desolate stretch of coastline. The wind howled like a tormented spirit as I pushed open the creaky doors of the lobby. The flickering candlelight barely illuminated the worn-out carpet, giving the place an eerie ambiance. The Seaview Hotel was known for its unsettling history. Rumors of unexplained disappearances and paranormal phenomena swirled around it. Nevertheless, I had come seeking solitude and perhaps a hint of the macabre. Little did I know that I would experience a true horror beyond my wildest nightmares. I approached the front desk, where a frail, elderly man with watery eyes greeted me. His name tag read, Mr. Anderson. "Room 237, he mumbled, his voice quivering as he handed me an ancient brass key. "It's the only one available tonight." As I made my way down the dimly lit hallway, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Paintings of long-dead guests adorned the walls, their eyes seemingly following my every move. The air was heavy with a musty odor, and the floorboards groaned beneath my footsteps. Upon entering room 237, I was hit by an overpowering smell of mildew. The wallpaper peeled away from the walls, revealing patches of mold that seemed to ooze like a living organism. The room was furnished with outdated, rotting furniture, and the wind outside rattled the windows like angry spirits demanding entry. I unpacked my belongings, trying to ignore the creeping unease that settled in my gut. I reasoned that it was merely my overactive imagination, fueled by the hotel's sinister reputation. However, my skepticism was shattered that very night. As I lay in bed, struggling to drift off to sleep, I heard a soft whisper, barely audible over the howling wind outside. It seemed to come from the corner of the room. I froze, straining my ears to listen. "Help me?" the voice whispered, barely more than a breath. "In the closet!" My heart raced as I stared at the closet door, bathed in moonlight. The voice sounded like that of a child, desperate and pleading. My rational mind urged me to dismiss it as a trick of my imagination, but the words were so real, so distinct. Summoning every ounce of courage, I slowly got out of bed and inched closer to the closet. The knob felt ice-cold in my hand as I turned it. The door swung open, revealing an impenetrable darkness within. My flashlight barely cut through the shadows. "Who's there?" I stammered, my voice trembling. The whisper came again, this time more urgent. "Help me, please!" With a trembling hand, I ventured into the closet, my flashlight's beam revealing an old, dusty trunk pushed against the back wall. I approached it cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. When I lifted the lid, the beam of light fell upon the emaciated form of a young boy. He was no older than 10, his skin pallid and eyes sunken. He wore clothes from another era, tattered and stained. I gasped, my heart aching with pity and terror. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The boy stared at me with hollow eyes and rasped. "I've been trapped here for so long. They won't let me leave. You have to help me." Fear coursed through my veins as I considered the implications. I had stumbled upon a malevolent force within the Seaview Hotel, a force that had ensnared the soul of an innocent child. But I couldn't leave him to his fate. I made a snap decision and reached out to touch the boy's frail hand. As soon as our skin made contact, a searing pain shot through my body, and I felt my consciousness being pulled into a dark abyss. I found myself in a nightmarish realm, a twisted reflection of the hotel. Tormented souls writhed in agony, their anguished screams filling the air. It was a place where time held no meaning, and despair was eternal. Amidst the suffering, I spotted the boy, his eyes now filled with gratitude. He whispered, "Thank you," before vanishing into the darkness. I awoke back in room 237, drenched in sweat and gasping for breath. The closet door was closed, and the room was once again shrouded in darkness. Had it all been a dream, or had I truly ventured into the realm of the damned? I couldn't stay in that room any longer. With trembling hands, I packed my belongings and fled the Seaview Hotel, leaving behind the horrors that lurked within. As I stepped out into the stormy night, I couldn't shake the feeling that the boy's spirit had been set free. But at what cost? To this day, I can't forget the haunted Seaview Hotel and the true horror I encountered in room 237. It serves as a chilling reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved, some doors better left unopened, and some hotels better left abandoned to the darkness that haunts them. As I sit here trying to find the words to recount the events that transpired in that forsaken hotel, my heart races and my hands tremble. I know that what I'm about to share is not just a ghost story. It's a horrifying experience that scarred me for life. It was a warm summer evening when my family decided to take a road trip through the countryside. We were adventurous people, always seeking out new experiences, but nothing could have prepared us for what we would encounter that night. Our journey led us to a small, isolated town named Brookhaven, nestled deep within the woods. It was a picturesque place with winding roads and charming cottages, but what caught our attention was the Ivywood Hotel, a grand Victorian-era building that seemed out of place in the sleepy town. It stood tall, its weathered stone facade hinting at a dark and eerie history. The hotel's reception area was dimly lit, and the atmosphere was oddly oppressive. The clerk behind the desk, a gaunt man with sunken eyes, welcomed us with a forced smile as he handed over the key to room 345. My parents, unaware of the creeping unease I felt, laughed it off as the eccentricities of a historic hotel. The elevator groaned as we ascended to the third floor. The corridor was dimly lit, with faded floral wallpaper peeling at the edges. As we approached room 345, I couldn't help but notice the heavy silence that hung in the air, almost as if the very walls of the hotel were holding their breath. Upon entering the room, I immediately felt a chill run down my spine. The room was spacious, but the furniture seemed outdated and mismatched. An old ornate mirror on the wall caught my eye, its glass slightly distorted as if it had witnessed unspeakable horrors over the years. My parents settled in for the night, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I decided to explore the hotel, hoping to distract myself from the growing sense of dread. As I wandered the hallways, I came across a painting of a family that sent shivers down my spine. Their eyes followed me as I moved, their expressions frozen in eternal anguish. I ventured down to the basement, which was dimly lit and filled with an unsettling silence. The walls were lined with dusty old photographs of guests who had stayed at the Ivywood Hotel over the years. Some of them had eerie smiles, while others looked downright terrified. It was as if the hotel had absorbed their souls, trapping them within its walls. As I continued exploring, I stumbled upon a hidden staircase that led to the upper floors. Curiosity got the better of me, and I climbed higher and higher until I reached the attic. The air was stale, and the attic was filled with antique trunks and forgotten relics. But what caught my attention was a dusty old journal resting on a wooden crate. I carefully opened the journal and began to read. It was a diary of a previous guest, a man who had stayed in room 345. His entries were filled with tales of sleepless nights, whispers in the darkness, and chilling encounters with something he couldn't quite describe. He wrote of a malevolent presence that seemed to lurk in the shadows, growing stronger with each passing day. As I read on, I couldn't help but notice the date of his last entry. It was the same date as today, exactly 1 year ago. My heart raced as I realized the connection between his experiences and my own. Was I about to become the next victim of whatever malevolent force haunted this hotel? I hurried back to our room, my mind racing with fear. My parents were sound asleep, unaware of the terror that had befallen me. I tried to wake them, but their slumber was too deep. I knew I had to get us out of there, but the thought of the hotel's dark history weighed heavily on me. Just as I was about to give up, I heard a faint whisper coming from the corner of the room. It was a soft, raspy voice filled with malice. "You should have never come here," it hissed. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The voice seemed to come from the old mirror on the wall, and as I stared into its distorted glass, I saw a pair of bloodshot eyes staring back at me. I bolted from the room, leaving my parents behind in their deep slumber. As I raced down the stairs and through the darkened hallways, the malevolent presence pursued me, whispering chilling threats in my ear. I burst into the lobby, where the clerk watched me with those same sunken eyes, his smile now a sinister grin. I ran out of the Ivywood Hotel, never looking back. The terror I felt that night will haunt me forever. I later learned that the hotel had a dark history of mysterious disappearances and unexplained deaths, all tied to room 345. It's a place where the line between the living and the dead blurs, and where nightmares become reality. I share this story now as a warning to all who may be tempted by the allure of the Ivywood Hotel. Stay away from room 345, and if you ever hear a whisper in the darkness, heed its warning and flee before it's too late. The true horror of that night still lingers in my nightmares, and I pray that no one else will have to endure the terror that I experienced in that cursed hotel. It was a dark and stormy night when I arrived at the Moonlight Hotel. The rain battered the windows, and the wind howled like a mournful ghost. The old, decrepit building stood on the outskirts of town, its imposing facade and flickering neon sign making it look more like a haunted mansion than a place for weary travelers. Little did I know that my decision to stay in room 789 would lead me down a path of terror I could never have imagined. I checked in at the front desk, where the concierge gave me an odd look when I requested room 789. She reluctantly handed me the key, cautioning me about strange occurrences in that particular room. I chuckled at her superstitious warnings, thinking it was all just an elaborate ruse to add some excitement to my stay. As I entered the room, the air grew heavy and cold. The wallpaper was peeling, and the furniture was covered in dusty white sheets. The only source of light was a dim, flickering lamp on the nightstand. I decided to turn in early, but sleep was elusive. In the dead of night, I was awakened by a chilling whisper that seemed to come from all corners of the room. It was not a voice I recognized, and it sent a shiver down my spine. The words were indecipherable, like a language from the netherworld, and they filled the room with an eerie, otherworldly presence. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding in my chest, trying to rationalize the experience. Maybe it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But then, the room grew even colder, and the shadows began to move, taking on a sinister life of their own. A figure emerged from the darkness, a ghostly apparition that seemed to be a woman in a tattered wedding gown. Her eyes were empty voids, and her skin was pallid and translucent. She glided toward me, her movements unnatural and disjointed, as if she were floating just above the ground. I wanted to scream, to run, but fear had paralyzed me. The ghostly bride extended her hand toward me, and her voice, though still incomprehensible, grew more urgent and haunting. I felt a cold, clammy grip on my wrist, and her touch sent an electric shock of terror through my body. Desperate to break free, I wrenched my arm away and stumbled out of bed. The ghostly bride advanced, her gaze never leaving me. I fumbled for the door, my hands shaking as I tried to unlock it, but the key wouldn't turn, and the door remained stubbornly shut. I turned to confront the ghostly figure, my breath coming in ragged gasps. She was now inches away, her face contorted in a grotesque mockery of a smile. With a sudden burst of courage, I yelled at her to leave, to go back to wherever she came from. The room quaked, and the walls seemed to close in on me. The ghostly bride let out an agonized scream, and then she vanished, leaving me alone in the darkened room. The temperature slowly returned to normal, and the shadows stopped their unnatural dance. Exhausted and shaken, I finally managed to unlock the door and fled the room, leaving behind my belongings. I never looked back, never returned to the Moonlight Hotel. To this day, I cannot explain what I witnessed in room 789. I've heard stories of the hotel's dark history, of a bride who met a tragic end on her wedding night, but I can't be sure if what I encountered was her restless spirit or something even more malevolent. One thing is certain, the haunting of room 789 is real, and I will never forget the horrors that lurk within its walls.